Marcus Hale had built his empire one sleepless night at a time. At 53, he sat behind a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars, on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle, surrounded by the kind of quiet that only money can buy. The city glittered below him like a circuit board come to life, rain streaking down the floor-to-ceiling windows in thin silver lines. He liked the rain. It gave him an excuse not to go home. His phone lay on the desk beside a stack of unsigned contracts. It had been buzzing on and off for the past hour. He hadn't looked at it once. This was a Tuesday night in November, and Marcus Hale was, as usual, exactly where he chose to be. Alone. Working. In control of everything except, perhaps, the parts of himself he had long since decided not to examine too closely. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of jawline that photographers loved and employees feared. His dark hair was cut short and precise, the way he liked all things. His navy suit jacket was still on at 9:30 in the evening, because Marcus believed that the moment you loosened your collar was the moment you started losing. He had read that somewhere in his 30s and adopted it as gospel. His assistant, a patient young man named Derek, had gone home at 7. The floor was empty. Just Marcus and the hum of the servers 2 floors down and the soft percussion of rain against glass. The phone buzzed again. He glanced at it this time, not because he wanted to, but because the buzzing had found a rhythm that interrupted his concentration. He expected to see Derek's name, or perhaps his CFO reminding him about the board presentation Thursday morning. Instead, the name on the screen read, Sophie. He set his pen down. Sophie was his daughter. She was 24 years old, and she lived across the city in a small apartment she had chosen herself, filled with second-hand furniture and houseplants she actually remembered to water. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, which Marcus had never quite understood, though he had stopped saying so out loud after the argument it caused 2 Christmases ago. He and Sophie talked, in the way that fathers and daughters sometimes talk when they love each other but have forgotten how to say so easily. Brief calls on birthdays. Occasional Sunday dinners that ended a little too quietly. Texts that he often read and meant to answer, then forgot to, because something always came up. He looked at the string of messages. The first had come at 7:15. Hey Dad. Working late again. Then at 7:40. I'm nearby. Just finished a client meeting. Brought you something. Then at 8:10. Still here if you want company. No pressure. Then at 8:50. It's raining pretty hard. I got a little soaked LOL. I'll head home soon. And then, the one that had just arrived, at 9:32, which was the one that made Marcus Hale set down his pen and stay very still for a moment. It's okay, Dad. I know you're busy. I just wanted to see you. Good night. I love you. He read it twice. Then he stood up. He didn't think about it the way he thought about acquisitions or quarterly projections. He simply stood, the way a person stands when something older and quieter than logic tells them to move. He walked to his office door, opened it, and stepped out into the corridor. The hallway was long and carpeted in charcoal gray. The overhead lights had dimmed to their after-hours setting, casting everything in a gentle, amber-tinged glow. The elevator bank was at the far end, and Marcus walked toward it without knowing exactly what he expected to find. What he found was Sophie. She was standing just outside the glass partition that separated the elevator lobby from the main office floor, her back to him, looking down at her phone. She wore a yellow rain jacket, the bright, cheerful kind, the color of school buses and daffodils, and it was damp across the shoulders and spotted with rain. Her blonde hair was pulled up in a loose knot, with pieces falling around her face the way it always had since she was small. She carried a paper bag in one hand, soft and slightly wet at the bottom, and her tote bag was slung over one shoulder. She hadn't left yet. She was still there. Marcus stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his daughter, and something happened in his chest that he was not entirely prepared for. It was not dramatic. It was not the sharp pain of regret, the way it was sometimes described in the books his late wife Eleanor had loved. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of seeing clearly after a long time of not quite focusing. Sophie was typing something on her phone. Her ride home, probably. She was getting ready to leave. He said her name. She turned. For a moment, neither of them moved. She looked at him the way young people sometimes look at their parents, with that complicated mixture of surprise and love and old, layered hurt that never quite resolves itself, and Marcus looked at her the way fathers sometimes look at their children when they finally stop being too busy to really see them. Then Sophie smiled. It was Eleanor's smile. He had always known that, but tonight it landed differently. Tonight it made him understand, in the plain and simple way that the most important things are usually understood, that he had been wasting something precious. He walked toward her. "You're soaked," he said. "It's fine," she said. "I have the jacket." "The jacket isn't working very well." "No," she agreed, glancing down at herself, "it really isn't." He pushed open the glass door and held it, and she stepped through into the warmth of the office corridor. This close, he could see the rain caught in her eyelashes, the slight flush of cold in her cheeks. She smelled like rain and coffee and the lavender soap she had used since college, the same kind her mother used to buy in bulk from the farmer's market on Pike Place. "You waited 3 hours," he said. She shrugged one shoulder. "I was in the neighborhood." "Sophie." "I brought soup," she said, holding up the paper bag. "From that Thai place on 5th that you used to like." "Tom Kha." "I don't know if it's still warm." "It's been a while." He looked at the bag. He looked at her. He thought about all the texts he had read and not answered, all the Sunday dinners that had ended quietly, all the years of being so certain that building something lasting meant staying at the desk until the work was done, never stopping to consider that the most lasting things were not built at desks at all. "Come inside," he said. She hesitated, just for a second. Old habit. The old routine of not wanting to impose, of having learned through quiet repetition not to ask too much of him. It broke his heart a little, that hesitation. He recognized it for what it was, which was something he had taught her without meaning to, through years of not quite being present even when he was physically in the room. "Please," he added. That was the word that did it. He was not a man who said please easily, and Sophie knew it, and something in her expression shifted, softened, and she nodded and followed him back through the glass doors and down the amber-lit corridor to his office. He moved some files off the small leather sofa near the window and she sat down, setting the bag carefully on the low table in front of her. He went to the credenza along the wall and found 2 mugs, a habit left over from Eleanor, who had always said that no difficult conversation should happen without something warm to hold on to. He had a small electric kettle there, and some tea bags in a ceramic dish, chamomile and Earl Grey and a ginger blend that Derek had recommended once for late nights. "Tea?" he asked. "Please," she said. He filled the kettle and set it to boil, then came and sat across from her in the leather chair he usually saved for clients. Sophie was opening the soup containers, 2 of them, with careful, practiced hands. She had brought chopsticks and napkins and a small container of chili oil on the side, because she remembered that he liked it. She had thought about him. She had thought about what he liked. While he had been sitting at his desk not answering her messages, she had been standing in a noodle shop across the city thinking about the small details of who he was. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked up. "I should have answered," he said. "I was here. I saw the messages. I kept thinking I'd finish the section I was on and then reply, and then I'd start the next section, and..." He paused. "I'm sorry, Sophie." She was quiet for a moment. The rain continued against the windows, steady and soft, and the city glowed beyond it in blues and silvers, and the kettle began its low, rising hum. "I know you're busy," she said finally. Her voice was gentle. She had always been gentle, even when she had every right not to be. "That's not an excuse," he said. "No," she agreed, "but it's true. And I know it. Your mother used to say," he started, then stopped. He didn't often begin sentences with those words. They cost something. Sophie waited. She used to say that the difference between being busy and being unavailable is whether the people you love can feel you even when you're not there. He looked at his hands. "I've been thinking about that lately." "About which one I've been?" Sophie set down the chopsticks. Outside, the rain shifted, a little heavier now, drumming against the glass in a sound that Marcus had always found oddly comforting, like the world reminding you that it was still going, steady and unhurried, regardless of what you were or were not doing inside your glass tower. "She was always right," Sophie said softly. "Yes," he said. "She was." the kettle clicked off. He got up to make the tea, and she watched him, and they were quiet together in the way that people are quiet when they're finally saying the true things, even without words. He brought the mugs back and they sat, and Sophie lifted the lid off the soup containers, and the smell of coconut and lemongrass and ginger filled the room in a warm, fragrant wave that made Marcus think of the kitchen on Maple Street where he and Eleanor had lived when Sophie was born, when everything was smaller and quieter and he had not yet convinced himself that more was always better. "Can I tell you something?" Sophie said. "Always. I almost didn't come tonight." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I'd talked myself out of it twice on the way over. I thought, he's busy, he doesn't need me showing up unannounced, he'll probably be on a call, I'll just go home and text him like a normal person." She smiled a little. "But then I was walking past the building and I just thought, you know what, I miss my dad. And maybe he misses me too, even if he forgets to say it." Marcus felt something tighten and then release in his chest, the way a fist slowly opens. "I do," he said. "I miss you all the time, Sophie. I just..." He turned the mug in his hands. "I don't always know how to cross the distance I've made." She nodded slowly. She was not surprised by this. She had grown up watching him from the other side of various distances, learning to interpret his silences, to find the love in the space around the words he didn't say. She was fluent in the language of Marcus Hale, even the difficult parts of it. "You just did," she said. "You came out into the hallway. You were leaving. You still came." He looked at his daughter, this young woman with her damp yellow jacket and her lavender soap and her inherited smile, who had stood outside his office for 3 hours in the November rain because she missed her father, and who had still, even on her way out the door, told him she loved him. Not to make him feel guilty. Not as an accusation. Just because it was true, and she was brave enough to keep saying it even when he wasn't brave enough to earn it. He thought about what it cost her, that bravery. He thought about all the times she had extended her hand across the distance and he had been too deep in his own importance to reach back. He thought about the fact that she was here right now, sitting across from him with soup she'd carried through the rain, and that this ordinary Tuesday night moment, was the kind of thing he had been trading away for quarterly reports. "Tell me about the client meeting," he said. She looked slightly surprised. Then pleased. "You want to hear about it?" "I want to hear about everything," he said. "I want to know what you're working on. What you're thinking about. What makes you excited these days." A small light came into her eyes, the kind that doesn't switch on for polite conversation, only for real interest from someone you love. She started talking. She told him about the client, a small bakery in Capitol Hill that was trying to rebrand itself for a new generation while keeping the feel of the neighborhood institution it had been for 40 years. She talked about the challenge of that, the way good design has to hold two truths at once, honoring what was without being afraid of what's coming. She talked about color palettes and typography and the way a logo can carry an entire feeling if you get it right, the way a good font can make someone trust you before they've read a single word. Marcus listened. Not the way he usually listened in meetings, with one part of his attention on the current speaker and 3 parts already solving the next problem. He listened the way Eleanor had always listened to both of them, with his whole self turned toward her, like a lamp pointed at the one thing that mattered. Sophie noticed. He could see her noticing. They ate the soup, which was still warm enough, fragrant and rich, and they drank their tea, and the rain came and went in gentle waves against the window, and the city hummed its patient nighttime hum 42 floors below, and they talked the way they had not talked in a very long time. She asked him questions too, careful ones, the kind that revealed how closely she had been paying attention to his life even from a distance. She asked about the board presentation Thursday. She asked whether he still took his old walking route along the waterfront on Sunday mornings. She asked if he had called her Uncle Pete lately, his older brother in Portland, who Marcus had been meaning to visit for 2 years now. He hadn't. He told her so honestly. "Call him this weekend," she said. "He talks about you all the time when I see him. He's so proud of you, Dad. He just wants to see you." "When did you last see Pete?" "Last month. I drove up for his birthday." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I forgot his birthday." "He knows you're busy." "That phrase is doing a lot of work tonight," Marcus said, and Sophie laughed, a real laugh, the kind that sounds like someone's actual self rather than their social self, and Marcus smiled, and for a moment the office felt nothing like an office at all. After a while, Sophie looked at her phone and said it was getting late. She had a morning deadline. Marcus walked her to the elevator, and they stood together waiting for it in the dimmed amber corridor, and he thought about all the hallways he had walked alone in his life, choosing the long way around the things that mattered, telling himself he would get to them eventually. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Sophie stepped in and turned to face him. "This was nice," she said simply. "It was," he said. "Sophie. Next Sunday. Dinner. Your choice of restaurant. Not a Sunday dinner that ends quietly. A real one. We talk, we order dessert, the whole thing." She tilted her head, that gesture she had inherited from her mother. "You promise," she said. Not skeptically. Hopefully. "There is a difference," and he heard it. "I promise," he said. The elevator doors began to close. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, sweetheart. Text me when you get home." The doors closed. He stood in the corridor for a long moment after she was gone, looking at the place where she had been. Then he walked back to his office, sat down at his mahogany desk, and looked at the unsigned contracts and the quarterly projections and the presentation for Thursday morning. He looked at his phone. He opened it and typed a message to his brother Pete. "Hey. I know it's late. Just thinking about you. Can I come up to Portland next weekend? I miss you. Sorry it's been so long." He put the phone down. He looked out at the rain-streaked window, at the city glittering 42 floors below, and he thought about Eleanor, who had known from the very beginning what actually lasted. He thought about a yellow rain jacket and a paper bag of soup and a daughter who had stood in a hallway for 3 hours because she loved him. He thought about how many Tuesday nights there had been. How many there might still be, if he chose differently. He gathered the contracts into a neat stack, capped his pen, and turned off the desk lamp. For the first time in a long time, Marcus Hale went home.